Hi, everyone. Hope you're having an awesome day. Today we have 3 Reddit stories from r/ProRevenge. First story. My neighbor liked to clean. 2001. I had just moved to a quiet neighborhood where my children, 1 and 3, could play outside safely and grow up with neighborhood children. It was also nice for my cats, 3, to finally be able to run around outside. After the first week, it was our first garbage day. Everything neatly in closed bags and in our personal garbage container. In the morning, we had to place the container on the side of the road with the rest of the containers on our street. So it was there at 7 o'clock, after which I started cleaning my house. I had a white floor because I liked it, and that way I knew for sure that it was clean. I mopped daily. I was still extremely clean at that time because of crawling children. Then I did the shopping, and when I got home, I was in shock after opening my front door. My entire hall was full of unknown waste. Pieces of glass, sharp metal lids, pieces of food, cartons, plastics, etc. Clearly stuffed through the mail's lot. I already saw a number of neighbors looking at me expectantly behind their windows and in front of their house. It was clear that they knew more. After asking around, I was told who had thrown that garbage in my house. Conscious neighbor had done this with much fanfare. Something snapped inside me. A bomb in my frontal lobe, and all decency disappeared from my mind. Steam from my ears. I cleaned out the trash and put the kids in the living room. Then I cleaned the cat litter box. Normally I throw the entire contents in a bag, but now I was a bit more precise. I only scooped the shit and urine clumps out of the box and divided it evenly into 2 small bags. Those thin ones that tear quickly. I took the bags and went to the neighbor further down the street. I rang the doorbell and kept the bags behind me. The lady opened the door with a smug grin on her face. The door opened wide and I could quickly see her hall. On the right, a carpeted staircase. On the left, the open door to the living room. The hall continued for another 1.5 meters to the back after the stairs and door, where the toilet was. Everything was super clean. I asked her devilishly calmly if she had put that waste through my mail slot. Her answer was yes, followed by the reasoning that because I was new here, that the loose waste that was lying around the place containers must have been mine, because before we lived here that never happened. This was the moment that all the blood vessels in my eyes burst. The calm was gone. In a tirade of abuse, I made it clear to her that I had not been the polluter and that if she had any decency, she could have spoken to me instead of jumping to conclusions and dirtying my house and endangering my crawling children and animals by dumping that waste in my house like that. With the message that she liked to clean up so much, "Here please," and I threw the 2 bags in her hallway. One against the corner of the stairs and the other on the doorpost of the living room. Everything, really everything, was covered in shit and the splattered clumps of cat urine. With a warning/promise that if she ever thought of doing something like that again, I would smash all her windows, I turned around and went home. Everyone had seen and heard everything. Never heard anything from that neighbor again. No one ever thought of doing something like that to me again. I can still enjoy the face she pulled when she saw the bags flying. It was shock, fear, indignation, nausea, and despair all at once. Second story. When I wrote my dad's obituary, I didn't mention my mom and exposed her years of abuse and neglect. I originally posted this in Petty Revenge, but it was removed, so I'm guessing it's more appropriate for here. My dad died December 1st, 2022. He briefly lived with me before his passing after a long stint of being chronically ill for the past 15+ years. As his health declined, he relied more on my mom for things. Prior to this, she was never a great person and fully took advantage of his disability and mobility issues as he declined. For years, she claimed to be separated and divorced, talking to other men on the internet. She made claims many times she was going to move away and marry someone else. In addition, she took advantage of him financially. We tried every legal avenue we could find to have her kicked out, arrested, or force her out, but those attempts were met with responses that it was a civil matter and there was nothing that could be done. He made me durable power of attorney and added me to all his accounts. This is a small portion of her abuse, but I promise her actions were no less than neglectful and exploitive. I tried for years to get my dad to move in with me, but he wasn't leaving the house he worked so hard to pay for. I brought him home on hospice the day after Thanksgiving and made sure his final days were the best they could be. After meeting with the funeral home to carry out his final wishes, I was told they required consent from my mother to allow me to cremate him. It was no surprise she initially told me no and only agreed after I allowed her to keep the Social Security survivor benefits, which would have been hers anyway. I wrote his obituary and left her out of it. There was not a single word or mention he'd ever been married or had a spouse. I didn't feel she deserved to be recognized or viewed as a grieving widow when she spent their marriage as a shitty spouse in person. She lost her mind, and there were many questions from friends and family alike. I've spent years in therapy working through maternal narcissistic abuse and believe if she didn't want me to talk about it, she shouldn't have done it. When people asked about it, I was honest about the years of abuse my father and I endured from her. I've completely ruined the public image and victim complex she spent years creating. I might be the villain and asshole in this scenario, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Third story. Not going to pay overtime? Think again. I was discussing this sub with a good friend, and he said, "Boy, have I got a story that'll fit." It wasn't his story, but his brother's, and I sat with him and got the details. Buckle up, it's a good one. And a long one. Let's call him Bob. Bob has been fiddling with computers since he was a kid, and knows them pretty well. As with most IT people, he's moved from job to job. The employer he worked for was a service/distribution company, and there were 2 IT employees. The company was located in Ontario, Canada. About 3 years ago, Bob's employer decided to modernize their software. They had separate programs for dispatching, for inventory, for payroll and finances, and it was complicated moving information from one program to the other. They decided to get an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning program, and Bob recommended one that he knew inside out from a previous employer. For those of you who don't know, an ERP program handles everything. Purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers, all of it. You can run a report and find out which customer has bought the most part ABC in the last year, which salesman has improved his numbers the most, which vendor has the fastest delivery time, which shipper packed the most orders. Everyone in the company used the ERP program, but it was very complicated, and they used the aspects of it that related to their position. For example, the receiver would accept a shipment, verify the quantity, confirm it was received, and the inventory stats would be available to the salespeople if they wanted to look up how many were on hand. The receiver didn't care what the price was, or who the vendor was, he just did his job. Bob was run ragged during the implementation process, but he managed to train most of the employees on their aspects, and after a few months, everything was running fairly smoothly. Bob still got tickets for tweaks in the operation of the software and occasional hardware IT issues. Then the company decided to expand their footprint and was marketing into different time zones. That messed things up. Atlantic Canada is 90 minutes early, so if someone sent an email or an order at 8 a.m. their time, it would arrive at 6:30 a.m. Ontario time. Pacific Canada is 3 hours late. So an email sent at 3 p.m. Vancouver time would arrive at 6 p.m. This stretched out the day, so many staff came in early and worked late. Bob would arrive at 8 a.m. and there would be people that demanded his immediate assistance and were annoyed that he didn't respond instantly, even though their request was submitted before his start time. Same with late in the day. His phone would ring at dinner time with people that wanted help right now. They decided to stagger his and his IT colleagues' shift times. Bob would start at 6 a.m. and work till 2:30, and his colleague would start at 10:30 a.m. and work till 7 p.m. Bob's colleague had kids and refused the shift change. The employer insisted. The colleague quit. That meant that Bob was the only person in the IT department. The employer said they would look to hire a new IT guy, but they had trouble finding one that knew the ERP system. And they were offering well under a market value salary. Bob asked for a raise and was denied. Then he wanted overtime, and the employer told him that as an IT specialist, he was exempt from overtime laws in Ontario. Bob looked it up, and the employer was correct. This went on for some time, and he knew lots of IT people socially. They told him what the company was offering, and Bob knew that they wouldn't find another tech. Things went downhill from there. Bob would get chewed out if he missed a call or an email, no matter what time it came in. He had to train new hires in the ERP system, as well as take care of the hardware. He asked repeatedly for better compensation and was denied. So he planned to get a new job. Now here's the revenge. Bob had access to the entirety of the ERP program. When a user signed in, the time was logged, and even if they didn't sign out, after 15 minutes it would log them out anyway. Everyone in the company was on salary, and many of them came in early and stayed late. Ontario labor law states that even salaried workers are entitled to overtime after 44 hours a week, unless they were managers or supervisors. So Bob jumped into the program and ran a report for each employee that wasn't a manager, all the way back to when the ERP program was started. Then he reached out to an employment lawyer and got the okay to refer employees to him. Bob lined up another job, and after he left, every employee in the company got an email with an Excel sheet showing the hours they had put in past 44 hours a week. The subject line said, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." In the body of the email was the lawyer's name. The shit hit the fan. Almost every employee authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf, and the company had to pay a ton of money. All the company had to do was pay Bob for the extra work he put in. Instead, they had to pay almost everyone. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. And please feel welcome to subscribe.